Daniel Hughes sat alone at the kitchen table, his calloused fingers wrapped around a cold beer bottle as he stared at the lipstick stain on Rachel's wine glass from the night before. The house was quiet. Too quiet for 7:30 on a Thursday evening. Once, she would have been here, asking about his day at the garage while dinner simmered on the stove. Now the kitchen felt like a museum of their former life. Each object a relic of something lost. Going out with the girls again, Rachel had announced that morning, barely looking up from her phone as she poured coffee. Her thumb moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, guarding whatever conversation held her attention more than her husband of 14 years. "That's 3 times this week," Daniel had observed, keeping his voice neutral. "So," she replied defensively, the sharpness coming quick. "Sarah's going through a rough patch with Tom. She needs support." Daniel had nodded, though last week it had been Jessica who needed support after a bad breakup. The week before that, someone named Miranda he'd never heard of. The names changed depending on the night. A rotating cast of alibis that never quite matched up. He took another pull from his beer and examined his hands. Permanent grease stains under the nails. Small scars from years of busted knuckles and slipped wrenches. These hands had built a life, fixed countless engines, held Rachel through miscarriages and her mother's death. Now they felt useless, unable to repair whatever had broken between them. The changes had started about a year ago, subtle as a slow leak in a brake line. New clothes appeared in her closet, silky blouses and fitted dresses she never wore for him. She joined a gym, but her schedule never seemed consistent. Her phone, once casually left on counters and nightstands, now lived in her hand or locked in her purse. "You're being paranoid," he'd told himself for months. This is what happens after 14 years. People change. But paranoia didn't explain the new perfume, something expensive and unfamiliar that clung to her clothes on those late nights. It didn't explain why she'd stopped wearing the anniversary necklace he'd saved 6 months to buy her, or why their bedroom had become a place where 2 strangers slept on opposite edges of a king-sized bed. Rachel emerged from the bedroom, and Daniel's chest tightened. She looked stunning in a black dress he'd never seen before, her auburn hair styled in soft waves that must have taken an hour to perfect. The earrings were new too, small diamonds that caught the light when she moved. "You look nice," he said, meaning it. "Thanks," she replied without meeting his eyes, busy checking her purse for keys, phone, wallet. "Don't wait up. Sarah wants to hit that new wine bar downtown, might be late." "Which one?" he asked, a pause barely noticeable. "Revolution, I think it's called," she answered. Daniel said nothing, just watched as she slipped on heels that seemed too high for a casual girls' night. He'd driven past Revolution yesterday. It was closed for renovations. Had been for 2 weeks. She moved toward him for the goodbye kiss, that obligatory peck that had replaced the lingering embraces of their early years. Her lips barely grazed his cheek, cool and efficient. The perfume hit him again, definitely not the vanilla scent he'd bought her for Christmas. "Have fun," he managed. "Thanks, hun," she replied. The endearment sounded hollow, like an actor forgetting to put feeling into their lines. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Daniel listened to her heels on the driveway, the car door slam, the engine starting. He moved to the window and watched the taillights disappear down their quiet street. She used to wave goodbye from the car. Now she didn't even look back. He returned to the kitchen table and his warming beer. The house settled around him with familiar creaks and sighs, but it felt different now, less like a home and more like a stage set for a marriage that only existed when they were both present to perform it. Daniel picked up his phone, thumb hovering over her contact. He could call, make up some excuse about forgetting what time she'd be home, but he knew she wouldn't answer. She never did anymore on girls' nights. As he sat in the gathering darkness of their kitchen, something shifted in Daniel Hughes. The patient acceptance that had defined him, the steady, reliable nature that made him a good husband and an excellent mechanic, hardened into something else. He was tired of questions without answers. Tired of pretending not to notice the distance between them growing wider with each passing day. Tomorrow, he decided he would stop wondering and start finding out the truth. Whatever it cost him, The package arrived at the garage during Daniel's lunch break on Friday, small and innocuous in its Amazon envelope. He signed for it with greasy fingers, his stomach tight with the knowledge of what lay inside. For 3 days, he'd researched GPS trackers with the same methodical attention he applied to diagnostic flowcharts for faulty transmissions. Battery life, signal strength, magnetic mounting options, every specification weighed and measured. "What's that?" Tommy, his young apprentice, asked through a mouthful of submarine sandwich. "Diagnostic equipment," Daniel replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. He was diagnosing something, just not an engine. The tracker was smaller than he'd expected, about the size of a matchbox, with a powerful magnetic base that would hold firm against any metal surface. The accompanying app promised real-time location updates, route history, and geofencing alerts. Tools for concerned parents and fleet managers, the website claimed. Nothing about suspicious husbands. That evening, Daniel waited until Rachel left for her yoga class, or wherever she actually went on Friday nights. He'd give her 20 minutes, enough time to be well clear of the neighborhood. The device felt heavy in his pocket as he walked to the driveway, heavier than its 2 ounces should allow. Her Camry sat in the fading sunlight, recently washed and waxed. Daniel had maintained this car for 8 years, changed its oil, rotated its tires, replaced the alternator last spring. He knew every inch of its undercarriage, which made the installation feel like an even greater violation. He slid under the rear bumper, flashlight between his teeth, and found the perfect spot. Tucked up behind the spare tire well where road spray wouldn't reach, but the signal could still transmit clearly. The magnet clicked against the metal with a soft thunk that sounded like finality. Back inside, Daniel downloaded the app and created an account with a throwaway email address. The setup was surprisingly simple, clearly designed for users without technical expertise. Within minutes, a blue dot appeared on his phone screen, stationary in their driveway. He watched it for a moment, this digital representation of his marriage, then slipped the phone into his pocket. Rachel returned 90 minutes later, yoga mat under her arm, wearing the same clothes she'd left in. But her hair was perfect, not a strand out of place, no sign of the ponytail she always wore to actual yoga classes. The mat looked pristine, unused. "Good class?" he asked from the couch. "Great. Really centered," she replied, heading straight for the shower, taking her phone with her. That night, Daniel lay awake studying the app's history feature. The yoga studio was 15 minutes away, but she'd driven 25 minutes to a residential neighborhood in Riverside, parked for exactly 1 hour, then come home. The address meant nothing to him, yet. Over the following 3 weeks, Daniel developed a routine. Every morning, he'd check the overnight data to ensure the car hadn't moved. During work, he'd resist the urge to constantly monitor, limiting himself to lunch break reviews. But evenings when Rachel went out, those became his obsession. He'd sit in his recliner, beer in one hand, phone in the other, watching the blue dot navigate through the city. Restaurant parking lots that matched her stated destinations, followed by unexplained detours. Shopping centers where she'd park for hours but come home empty-handed. That same Riverside address appeared 4 more times. Though she never mentioned visiting anyone in that area, the data accumulated like evidence in a case he didn't want to prosecute. Screenshots filled a hidden folder on his phone. Patterns emerged. Thursdays were the longest nights, starting with legitimate destinations before diverging into mystery routes. The credit card statements he'd never bothered to review now showed charges that didn't align with her stated locations. A restaurant in Riverside when she was supposedly downtown. A gas station 40 miles away when she claimed to be shopping locally. "You okay?" Tommy asked one afternoon, catching Daniel staring at his phone instead of the brake job in front of him. "You seem distracted lately." "Just tired," Daniel replied, pocketing the phone. "Rachel's been going out a lot. House feels empty." "My girl did that for a while," Tommy offered carefully. "Turned out she was planning a surprise party for me." Daniel forced a smile. "Yeah, maybe that's it," he answered, knowing better. But he knew better. The tracker had become his window into a parallel life Rachel was living, one that existed in the spaces between her lies. Each notification felt like discovery and betrayal simultaneously. He was violating her privacy to uncover her violations of their marriage, a circular destruction that ate at him even as he couldn't stop. Exactly 3 weeks after installing the tracker on a Thursday evening, Rachel announced another girls' night. "Sarah really needs us right now," she said, checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. Her divorce is getting ugly. Daniel wondered if Sarah even existed, or if she was just another fictional character in Rachel's elaborate performance. "Where are you going?" he asked. "That new cocktail place downtown. Revolution should be open by now," she replied. He'd driven past Revolution yesterday. It was still closed for renovations, would be for another month according to the sign. "Sounds fun," he said. "Be safe." She kissed his cheek, that same cold, obligatory gesture, and left. Daniel was already pulling up the tracking app before her car left the driveway. For a moment, the dot moved toward downtown, and he wondered if maybe, this time, she'd told the truth. Then it turned east, away from the city, heading toward the interstate. Daniel set down his beer and leaned forward, watching the dot accelerate onto the highway. This was new. In 3 weeks of tracking, she'd never left the city limits. His heart hammered as the dot continued east, mile after mile, far beyond any reasonable girls' night destination. 40 miles. She was driving 40 miles away, deeper into rural territory, toward places Daniel hadn't been since high school fishing trips. He pulled up the satellite view, zooming in as the dot finally slowed, turned off the main road, and followed what looked like a private drive. The dot stopped moving. Daniel stared at the screen, at this point in the middle of nowhere that represented the end of his marriage. He screenshot the location, then opened a browser to search the address. His wife was 40 miles from home, at a lakeside cabin owned by someone named Michael Henley, and Daniel finally had a name for what he'd suspected all along. Daniel sat frozen in his recliner, staring at the blue dot that hadn't moved in 20 minutes. His beer had gone warm, forgotten in his left hand, while his right gripped the phone like a lifeline, or a weapon. The satellite image showed a modest cabin surrounded by trees, a private dock extending into the lake. The kind of place people went for romantic weekends, not girls' night out. Michael Henley. Daniel rolled the name around in his mind as he opened Facebook on his laptop. It took less than 5 minutes to find him, a contractor with his own construction company, Henley Custom Homes. The profile was public, filled with photos of job sites, expensive trucks, and a boat that probably cost more than Daniel made in a year. Divorced, according to his relationship status, as of 8 months ago. Originally from their town, but now living in Riverside, the same area where Rachel had made those unexplained visits over the past 3 weeks. The profile pictures showed a man who clearly took care of himself. Gym selfies, hiking photos, the kind of casual wealth that came from owning a successful business rather than working for one. 5 years younger than Daniel, with a full head of hair and the confident smile of someone who'd never spent a day under a car, covered in grease wondering how to make ends meet. Daniel clicked through more photos. There, a group shot from a charity golf tournament 4 months ago. Local business owners and their guests. He almost missed her in the background, partially hidden behind another woman. But there was Rachel, laughing at something, a glass of wine in her hand, standing just close enough to Michael to suggest intimacy without confirming it. The date matched with a weekend she'd supposedly spent visiting her sister in Columbus. Daniel had offered to go with her, but she'd insisted he'd be bored, that it was just girl talk and shopping. He'd actually been relieved, spent the weekend rebuilding a classic Mustang engine. More searching revealed Michael's Instagram, also public. Daniel scrolled through months of posts looking for any sign of Rachel. He found it in the details, a table set for 2 at an expensive steakhouse dated 2 weeks ago, the night Rachel had her book club, a sunset photo from an overlook Daniel recognized, posted on a Thursday when Rachel had worked late. Never her face, never anything definitive, but the timing lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. Daniel's mechanic brain kicked in, approaching this like a complex diagnostic problem. He created a spreadsheet, cross-referencing Rachel's stated locations with the GPS data and Michael's social media posts. The pattern was undeniable. Every girls' night corresponded with gaps in Michael's online activity. Every unexplained charge on their credit card matched the kinds of places Michael frequented. The Riverside address Rachel had visited 5 times in 3 weeks. Michael's home, confirmed by a photo of him standing in front of the same house 6 months ago. The blue dot still hadn't moved. Daniel stood, pacing the living room as rage and hurt battled for control. Part of him wanted to drive those 40 miles right now, kick down the door, confront them both. But the rational part, the part that had spent 3 weeks carefully gathering evidence, knew better. Confrontation would just lead to denials, tears, maybe temporary remorse before the pattern repeated. He forced himself to sit back down, to document everything. Screenshots of Michael's profiles, the GPS location, credit card statements highlighted with suspicious charges. He uploaded everything to a cloud drive, creating a backup of the backup. When this ended up in divorce court, he'd need evidence. Indiana was a no-fault state, but adultery could still affect property division and alimony. The thought of lawyers and court proceedings made this real in a way that 3 weeks of suspicion hadn't. This wasn't just a rough patch or a midlife crisis. This was Rachel actively choosing another man, building an entire secret life, while Daniel played the fool at home. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Having so much fun." Sarah's finally laughing again. "Might be later than planned. Don't wait up. Love you." The casual cruelty of it took his breath away. She was lying naked in another man's bed, he was certain of that now, and still texting him these perfect little deceptions. The "love you" at the end felt like mockery. Daniel typed and deleted a dozen responses. Finally, he settled on, "Glad she's doing better. Be safe." He returned to studying Michael Henley, trying to understand what Rachel saw in him beyond the obvious money and looks. The man's posts revealed someone who lived large: expensive whiskey, cryptocurrency investments, motivational quotes about success and grinding. Everything Daniel wasn't. While Daniel fixed cars for working families, Michael built McMansions for the wealthy. While Daniel came home covered in honest sweat and motor oil, Michael probably smelled like expensive cologne and possibility. The tracker showed movement. Daniel watched the dot pull away from the cabin, beginning the 40-mile journey back toward home. He calculated the time. She'd need at least an hour to drive back, maybe stop somewhere to freshen up, make herself presentable. That gave him time to prepare. He walked to their bedroom, looking at it with fresh eyes. Their wedding photo on the dresser, both of them so young, so certain of their future together. Rachel's jewelry box filled with pieces he'd bought over the years, scrimping and saving for each birthday and anniversary. The bed they'd shared for 14 years, now contaminated by the knowledge of where she'd just been. Daniel pulled out a suitcase from the closet, then stopped. No, he wouldn't be the one to leave. This was his house too, paid for with his sweat and sacrifice. If anyone was leaving, it would be her. Instead, he went to the garage and grabbed his toolbox, bringing it to the spare bedroom. Inside, beneath wrenches and socket sets, he placed the folder of evidence he'd been compiling. The GPS tracker's existence would remain his secret for now, insurance against whatever lies she might tell. The blue dot was halfway home now. Daniel returned to his recliner, arranged himself as if he'd been dozing, TV on low volume playing some game he didn't care about. He needed to seem normal, unaware, the same trusting fool he'd been for months. When Rachel's key turned in the lock at 12:47 a.m., Daniel had perfected his performance. He stirred as if just waking, blinking at her in the doorway. "Hey," he mumbled. "Have fun?" "Great time," she replied, not quite meeting his eyes. "Sarah's doing so much better. I'm going to shower and crash. Early meeting tomorrow." "Okay. Love you," he said. "Love you too," she answered. The words meant nothing now, just sounds they made from habit. Daniel listened to the shower run, imagining her washing away the evidence of her betrayal, erasing Michael's touch with soap and hot water. When she finally slipped into bed, staying on her side, maintaining that careful distance between them, Daniel lay perfectly still. He'd discovered the truth, all 40 miles of it. Now he just had to decide what to do with it. But as sleep finally took him, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Their marriage had driven past the point of repair, and no amount of diagnostic work could fix what Rachel had chosen to destroy. Tomorrow, he would start planning his response. Tonight, he would mourn the death of what they used to be, before GPS trackers and lakeside cabins, before Michael Henley and 40 miles of lies. The phone rang at 12:23 a.m., exactly 4 days after Daniel had watched the blue dot at Michael Henley's cabin. He'd been lying awake again, the insomnia now his nightly companion. The sharp electronic trill shattered the silence. "Hello?" Daniel's voice was rough with sleeplessness. "Mr. Hughes? This is Deputy Connor with the County Sheriff's Office. Are you the husband of Rachel Hughes?" the voice asked. The room seemed to tilt. "Yes, what's happened?" he responded. "Sir, there's been an incident. Your wife has been shot. She's being transported to County General. She's alive, but you need to get to the hospital immediately," the deputy explained. Daniel sat up, his mind struggling to process the words. "Shot? How? Where?" he asked. "At a residence on Lake Chapel Road. Sir, I can't provide more details over the phone, but please come to the hospital. Ask for Detective Williams when you arrive," Deputy Connor instructed. Lake Chapel Road. Daniel knew exactly where that was. He'd stared at it on satellite images for 4 days. Michael Henley's cabin. He dressed mechanically, jeans and the first shirt he grabbed, his movements automatic while his mind raced. As he drove through empty streets toward County General, the scenarios played out: robbery, home invasion, a hunting accident. But deeper, in the part of himself that had been preparing for confrontation, he knew none of those were right. The emergency room was harsh fluorescent brightness after the dark drive. A nurse directed him to a waiting area where Detective Williams, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, met him with practiced sympathy. "Mr. Hughes, I'm Detective Williams. Your wife is in surgery." The wound was serious, but the paramedics got to her in time. "The doctors are optimistic," she explained. "What happened?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice steady, drawing on the same control that had let him pretend normalcy for 3 weeks and 4 days. Williams studied him carefully. "There was a shooting at 4847 Lake Chapel Road. Your wife was found with a gunshot wound to the abdomen. A man named Michael Henley was pronounced dead at the scene," she reported. Daniel felt the words land but showed nothing. "I don't understand. What was Rachel doing there?" he asked. The detective's expression remained neutral. "That's what we're trying to determine." "Were you aware your wife knew Mr. Henley?" she inquired. "No," he replied. The lie came easily. "Was it a robbery?" "We have someone in custody. Linda Henley, the victim's ex-wife. She's confessed to the shooting," Williams revealed. The waiting room seemed to spin slowly around Daniel. Another spouse, another betrayal, another person pushed past their breaking point. But Linda had brought a gun while Daniel had only brought a GPS tracker. "Can you think of any reason your wife would be at Mr. Henley's residence at that hour?" Williams asked, her tone suggesting she knew exactly why Rachel had been there. "No," Daniel repeated. "She said she was having drinks with friends downtown." Williams made a note. "Mr. Hughes, I need to ask, where were you tonight?" she questioned. "Home. Asleep until you called," he answered. "Can anyone verify that?" she pressed. Daniel almost laughed at the irony. His alibi for the night his wife was shot was that he'd been home alone, abandoned again while she met her lover. "No, I was alone," he replied. "I'll need to ask you more questions later, but for now, you should know that your wife is receiving excellent care. The surgeon will update you as soon as possible," Williams concluded. Williams left him in the waiting room with its uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. Daniel sat perfectly still, processing this collision of his planned confrontation with someone else's violent resolution. An hour later, a woman was escorted past in handcuffs. Linda Henley looked exactly like what she was, a betrayed spouse who'd snapped. Her clothes were blood-spattered, her face puffy from crying, but her eyes held a terrible clarity. She looked directly at Daniel as she passed, and in that moment, they understood each other perfectly. They were members of the same horrible club, but she'd paid a much higher admission price. The surgeon appeared near dawn. "Mr. Hughes, your wife is stable. The bullet damaged her liver and intestines, but we've repaired everything. She's very lucky. Another inch and it would have hit the hepatic artery," he explained. "Can I see her?" Daniel asked. "She's asking for you," the surgeon replied. The ICU was a symphony of machines keeping broken people alive. Rachel looked small in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, connected to IVs and monitors. Her eyes opened when he entered, immediately filling with tears. "Danny," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He pulled a chair beside the bed, studying her face. Even now, after everything, she was beautiful. But beauty wasn't enough anymore. "I know about Michael," he said quietly. "I've known for 3 weeks and 4 days." Her face crumpled. "It didn't mean anything. I was going to end it. I was going to tell him that night that it was over," she pleaded. Another lie, smooth and desperate. Daniel wondered if she even knew what truth was anymore. "I tracked your car," he continued, his voice conversational. "GPS device. I watched you drive to his cabin 4 nights ago. I know about all of it. Every girl's night for the past 3 weeks, every fake yoga class, every visit to his house in Riverside. I have screenshots, dates, times, everything. Danny, please. We can get through this. Couples therapy, whatever you want. I love you." "I never stopped loving you," she begged. "You were in another man's bed when his ex-wife shot you both. He's dead, Rachel." "A man is dead because of choices you made," he stated. "That's not my fault," she exclaimed, the heart monitor spiking with her agitation. "She was crazy. I didn't know—" "Linda Henley wasn't crazy," Daniel interrupted. "She was betrayed. Just like me. The only difference is she brought a gun and I brought divorce papers." He pulled the envelope from his jacket. He'd stopped at home to get them from his toolbox, along with all his documented evidence. "I've already talked to a lawyer. The police report will show you were having an affair. Indiana's no fault, but adultery still matters for asset division. You'll get half of what's left after the lawyers are paid, but no alimony. The house is mine. I can prove I've made every payment from my account. Danny, you can't, not now." "I almost died," she pleaded. "You almost died in another man's bed." "Michael is actually dead. Linda's going to prison. 3 lives destroyed because you couldn't end a marriage honestly," he replied coldly. Rachel tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled back. "Please, 14 years, Danny, doesn't that mean anything?" she asked desperately. "It meant everything to me. But apparently it wasn't enough for you," he answered. A nurse entered, checking monitors and adjusting IV drips. She glanced between them, clearly sensing the tension. "Mrs. Hughes needs rest," she said carefully. Daniel stood. "I'm leaving." "My lawyer will be in touch," he announced. "Danny, wait," Rachel called out. He stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "I spent 3 weeks and 4 days planning how to confront you. I had speeches prepared, dramatic revelations planned, but Linda Henley did all that for me. She gave you a scar you'll carry forever, a reminder of what your choices cost. Michael paid with his life. Linda paid with her freedom. You're paying with your marriage and your reputation. Everyone will know why you were shot, where you were. And me? I'm just walking away," he stated. He left her crying in the hospital bed, her pleas following him down the hallway. In the parking lot, dawn was breaking over the city. Daniel sat in his truck for a moment, then pulled out his phone and removed the tracking app. The blue dot disappeared from his screen forever. As he drove home, he passed early morning commuters starting their day, unaware of the drama that had unfolded overnight. The radio was already reporting the shooting. "Love triangle turns deadly," the morning DJ announced with inappropriate enthusiasm. By noon, everyone would know. Rachel's carefully constructed lies would crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. Daniel pulled into his driveway as the sun fully rose. The house looked the same, but everything had changed. Inside, he made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where this had all started, staring at the space where Rachel's wine glass used to sit. His phone buzzed with texts, friends who'd heard the news. Tommy from the garage, Rachel's sister demanding to know what happened. He ignored them all. There would be time for explanations later. For now, Daniel Hughes sat in his empty kitchen, a free man for the first time in months. The GPS tracker had led him to the truth, but Linda Henley's violence had delivered a justice he could never have orchestrated. He felt no satisfaction, just a hollow relief that it was over. Michael was dead. Linda was in custody. Rachel was broken. And Daniel? Daniel was done. He'd chosen investigation over violence, truth over comfortable lies, and dignity over desperate attempts to save something already dead. The tracker had been his tool, patience his weapon, and now divorce would be his freedom. Sometimes the best revenge really was just walking away and letting people face the consequences of their choices. Linda had chosen a gun. Rachel had chosen deception. Michael had chosen another man's wife. Daniel chose himself, finally and completely. And that was worth more than 14 years of lies could ever be, was enough. 6 months later, Daniel Hughes stood in his garage, wrench in hand, rebuilding a 1969 Camaro engine. The afternoon sun slanted through the bay doors, and classic rock played from the old radio he'd finally fixed. His hands were steady, movements precise, the kind of focus that only came with peace of mind. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. As predicted, the police report documenting the circumstances of the shooting had made everything straightforward. Rachel's lawyer had tried to argue for alimony, citing her ongoing medical bills and emotional trauma, but the judge hadn't been sympathetic. Adultery documented by law enforcement carried weight, even in a no-fault state. Daniel kept the house, the garage, and most of their savings. Rachel got her car. He'd removed the GPS tracker before signing it over, tucking the device into his toolbox where it now served as a paperweight and reminder. She'd never know it had been there, would probably always wonder how he'd discovered the affair exactly 3 weeks and 4 days before the shooting. That small mystery was his to keep. "Boss, Mrs. Peterson's here for her Honda," Tommy called from the office. "Be right there," he replied. Daniel wiped his hands on a shop rag. The familiar ritual of transitioning from work to customer service. Mrs. Peterson was a regular, had been bringing her cars to him for a decade. She smiled when she saw him, but there was something different in her expression now, the careful sympathy reserved for people touched by scandal. Everyone knew. In a town this size, the shooting had been the biggest news in years. The trial had made the front page of the local paper, woman sentenced to 15 years in love triangle shooting. Linda Henley had pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, accepting the plea deal rather than risk a murder conviction. During her statement, she detailed finding the GPS tracker on Michael's truck, following him to the cabin, seeing another woman's car, Rachel's car, in the driveway. The parallel wasn't lost on Daniel. They'd both used the same technology to uncover the same betrayal. But where Linda had brought a .38 revolver, Daniel had brought patience. Where she'd chosen violence, he'd chosen documentation. She was serving 15 years. He was rebuilding his life. "Running great now," Daniel told Mrs. Peterson, handing over her keys. "New alternator should last you another 100,000 miles. "You do such good work, Daniel." "Always have," she replied. She paused, then added quietly, "I'm glad you're doing well." After she left, Daniel returned to the Camaro. The engine was coming together beautifully, each part cleaned, checked, and installed with methodical precision. This was his meditation now. The resurrection of broken machines, the satisfaction of problems that could actually be solved with the right tools and knowledge. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Danny, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I destroyed everything good in my life. I loved you. I just lost my way. I hope someday you can forgive me." Our Daniel read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Rachel had moved to an apartment across town, close enough that people still saw her occasionally. She walked with a slight limp now, nerve damage from the shooting that would probably never fully heal. She worked at a dental office, having lost her previous job when the scandal broke. The woman who'd once glided through life in new dresses and diamonds now lived quietly, marked by choices that couldn't be undone. Michael Henley was buried in Riverside Cemetery. Daniel had driven past once, not to pay respects but to confirm the reality of it. A small headstone marked the end of a man who'd thought he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. His construction company had folded within weeks of his death, projects abandoned, workers scattered to other firms. The garage's landline rang. Daniel still kept it for older customers who refused to adapt to cell phones. It was a new customer, referred by someone who knew someone. Daniel scheduled the appointment, wrote it in the paper calendar he still preferred to digital alternatives. Business was good, actually better than before. There was something about being the wronged party in a scandal that generated sympathy business. As the sun began to set, Daniel closed up the garage and headed home. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like opening windows in a room that had been closed too long. He'd removed the wedding photos but kept everything else. This was his space now, arranged exactly how he wanted it. He grabbed a beer and settled into his recliner, the same one where he'd spent those 3 weeks and 4 days tracking Rachel's movements. The TV remote was exactly where he'd left it. No one would move it. No one would complain about his choice of shows. No one would interrupt the comfortable silence he'd learned to appreciate. The GPS tracker caught his eye from its spot on the bookshelf, holding down some invoices. Such a small device to have revealed such devastating truth. He'd paid $40 for it on Amazon, and it had saved him from years of lies, maybe decades of deception. The best investment he'd ever made, though he'd never recommend it to anyone. Some tools were too dangerous for most people to handle safely. Daniel Hughes had fixed his marriage problem the only way it could be fixed, by ending it completely. Linda Henley had tried to fix hers with violence and was paying the price. Michael had paid with his life for thinking he could take what wasn't his. Rachel was paying with a lifetime of regret and a scar that would never let her forget. But Daniel had simply diagnosed the problem, documented the evidence, and walked away when someone else's violence made the confrontation unnecessary. He'd chosen truth over comfortable lies, evidence over emotion, and patience over passion. Now he lived alone in a house that felt more like home than it had in years. He worked with his hands, creating value from mechanical precision. He slept peacefully without wondering where anyone was or who they were with. His life was smaller, perhaps, quieter, certainly, but it was honest. The tracker sat on his shelf, a monument to the power of truth and the danger of deception. Sometimes the best repair was complete disassembly. Sometimes the only fix was accepting that something was broken beyond redemption. Daniel raised his beer in a silent toast to his empty living room, to GPS satellites orbiting overhead, to ex-wives learning to live with consequences, to dead men who'd learned too late that everything has a price. He was free, completely, finally, peacefully free. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.